If you haven't seen my video about how I built this workbench, I'll link it up here, but this video is all about this lift system and how this works. Thanks for watching, let's jump right in. Along the way, I'm also going to go through all the improvements I made to the motorized flip top. Any of the items that I used in this build will be linked in the description. The heart of the motorized flip top is this electric hoist. I purchased this from Princess Auto, which is the Canadian version of Harbor Freight. The flip top lift requires two cables to be attached to the spindle. To keep the cables separate, I made a barrier out of 1/4-inch plywood, which is basically just two wooden donuts. This is not structural or anything. The idea is just to keep the two cables apart. With my two donuts cut out, I cut them in half over at the bandsaw. By turning the two rings a 1/4 turn to each other, I'm able to offset the seam on each side of the cut. With the glue dried, I added electrical tape to hide the exposed edge of the plywood. The original cable for the motorized lift was 1/8 inch, but I decided to beef it up while I was making some changes. The cable is threaded on each side of the spindle, so I had to add 2 holes on each side of the spindle to thread the cables onto the spindle. I could then reinstall the spindle onto the lift. The lift is attached to a 4/4 maple mounting plate on the lower back rail of the bench. I had to add longer bolts to the hoist to be able to attach it to this plate. I also added threaded inserts to the inside of the mounting plate so I could attach the whole assembly to the rail. So originally I had one double pulley separating the two cables, but somewhere within the testing of the mechanism, I must have pulled the pulley a little bit too hard and twisted it. So to better keep the cable separated, I removed the single double pulley and added 2 single pulleys. These single pulleys have mounting plates that are independent of each other, so I used a card scraper for gapping just so that I would have enough play in the pulleys. The cables run along the bottom rail and then through the cross supports before the second set of pulleys directs them up the front legs to the underside of the tabletop. Now the first iteration of this had the pulleys underneath the tabletop at 90 degrees to the flip top, but I found that the cables would work their way out of the pulleys and rub along the mounting plates. So I angled the pulleys at about roughly 80 degrees just to split the difference and prevent this from happening. The cables are then attached to eye bolts on each side of the front of the flip top and secured with cable clamps. So it might be tough to see, but buried kind of right in between these two plates here are pins like this. And now there's one on each side of the flip top. So when the planer is at its full height for travel, this can be engaged and it holds the weight of the flip top in place. So when I'm planing material, this holds it a lot more stable. As well, it takes the stress off the winch, so the cabling isn't actually holding the weight of the planer while it's in use. So to limit the travel of the flip top mechanism, I moved the limit switch from the winch to the top of the bench so the flip top would come in contact with that when it reached the top of its travel. I made an adjustable set screw to fine tune where I wanted the flip top to stop. The center of the bench has to be able to hinge fully out of the way, so I use these 180-degree soft hinges. And to support the center when it's flipped down, I add these extensions on the outside of each sides to hold the center in place and level with the rest of the bench. The lift platform is a piece of plywood that I reinforced for strength and rigidity with strips along the side of hard maple. And the flip top base is held in place with this heavy duty piano hinge. All right, so that's how the lift mechanism works. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. You probably noticed in this video that I had a separate winch that kind of got into some of the shots when I was demonstrating how this one worked. Well, that's for another project where I'm going to be installing another winch lift system into one of my pieces of shop furniture. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that. As well, I have another video that should be out right away here on installing a helical head into the Dewalt joiner. So that'll be up in the cards above if you want to check that out. And thanks for hanging out, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to see you hit that button. And thanks for coming along. You're still here. Okay, here's some bonus for you. I'm gonna go over some of the features of this bench, so there's your prize for sticking around to the very end. So this was a last minute decision, and I mean a last minute decision to add this push to open drawer to the end of the workbench. The bench was probably about 90% done when I decided to do this, and it's a great use of space because otherwise what am I gonna do on this end of this bench? But this houses all of my T-Track hold down hardware, as well as all the hold down hardware for my dog holes. So on this third of the bench, I've added dog holes. I've left the middle section and the far end without any dog holes, just because at this point, I'm not sure if I'm gonna need them or not. So can always add them in the future. Rockler has lots of great options for hold down options for dog holes, and I set it up in such a way where the quick release vise that they have will be used as a mechanism to tighten material down. So how it works is you're just dropping in your dog holes, loosening off the vise, getting it set in place, and then cranking it down, and then your material is firmly in place. So besides all the T-Track that I added to the top of the workbench, I also added T-Track to my sides. So at the front side of the bench, this gives me the ability, if I ever needed to mount a piece of material vertically, if I was planing it or edge banding, whatever it happens to be. I can do that really easily just by clamping it in place on the side of the bench. So to help make moving material back and forth a lot easier, the underside of the center section of the workbench that hinges out of the way has these rollers. And the rollers are designed that when material is being passed from one end to the other, you can easily just move the material back along the rollers. This operation with 2 people makes it a lot easier. So this bench does weigh a ton. Well, not a ton, but it weighs a lot between the planer and everything else. So I added removable wheels to the bottom just to make it easier for me to move this thing around the shop as I need to. And the way the wheels work is once I get the bench to where I want it to be, I just flip up on the sides and the bench drops to the ground. I really think I made a lot of use out of this workbench. It's actually made me rethink the whole setup of my garage. So stay tuned for more shop builds coming up over the next few months. I have queued up a couple extra videos here if you want to check those out. Guys, thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next build.